Hello? So, I am doing this video, because for me it's very personal. Um, you know, because, I just happened to pass by a few days ago and about the mass killing in Vancouver and, at that festival and that. And, I normally, for me personally, I hate mass murders. I hate them, you know. I have absolutely no regard for their life. I wish a lot of them would just die. But in this case, it was different because it was a guy who clearly had no history of violence, no probably, but he had mental health. He obviously, in the moment when he was doing it, they said he had mental health problems. So, as a person that has, autism, OCD, and schizophrenic tendencies myself, I understand that, and I know what it's like to be, sitting there just a regular person in the moment, and then when something triggers you, you just lash out, Not to mention, I myself have a cousin, her name is Shana, you know, that has anxiety disorders. She had really bad anxiety disorders, and my great aunt, she told me that, she told me that she had to leave work a couple times because her anxiety was just got too bad. And I think, just like him, that was a cry for help. Because anxiety, yes, and it normally happens because of a traumatic experience. And I know with my cousin, my great aunt told me that her mom was like pretty negligent in her life, like wasn't very active in her life and still isn't. So, and so when a person has a traumatic experience like that, or any traumatic experience, you know, they think that something is wrong with them, when they develop a mental health condition, like anxiety and depression and that. So I know that she struggles a lot with making friends and that because of her negligent mother, she might think that she might be a bad person, and it could affect, people when they're even in adulthood if they don't receive the help. Even if they don't appear to be violent, you know, they could still lash out and then hurt others in the moment if they have a level of anxiety in the moment. It could just come on, just boom, like that. So this guy could have been fine like an hour or two before, but then something could have happened and he could have developed anxiety, and then ended up killing all them people in the moment, ended up running into that festival. I don't think he meant to do it. I think it just happened in the moment, because that's what happens when you have anxiety and problems like that, right? And because a lot of people don't talk about their issues in the moment for whatever reason, and yes, you might be on medication and the medication may help to decrease that, but you also need to talk. You also need to get it out and talk about it. And, you have to cry. You have to give yourself a chance to grieve and cry and let people know. Only then will your anxiety get better. But just like my cousin, she never really told anybody about it either. So she would become very agitated, Aunt Pat told me, my great aunt told me that she'd become very agitated, very, like, angry, even if she was on medication. So she literally went to the hospital in, like, Englehart, and then they referred her to a counselor there, and she saw this lady, and, I think a couple of times, and, she told the counselor a lot of stuff that was on her mind. And she might have told her because she saw her a few times. Nah. So, and Aunt Pat said, boy, what a difference. What a difference in her. She's like, so it just goes to show you that, if you get the right person and, and you listen to that person and you allow them to tell you everything and to cry in front of you, and you don't put them down, you don't fault them, then they don't react in that way. They don't do the things like this guy did, because everybody reacts differently, but still, either way, one way or another, whether it's in your vehicle, whether it's you're out walking, a person that has anxiety may stomp and scream and throw things, and, it's because there's so much anxiety, there's so much built up inside of them. And it doesn't matter whether you're plow through a bunch of people or whether you're just shopping and you end up just throwing things just because you have anxiety. It doesn't matter. It hurts the people around you. It doesn't have to be physical. You don't have to be hurting anybody in particular, but just your actions and that can hurt people around you, So, and it's not necessarily the person's fault. It's, and like I said, I'm not excusing his behavior because I know it's wrong. I'm not saying, oh, because he has a mental illness, that's the reason he did that. It's like, that's not it. That's not a reason at all. Because there's lots of people that have mental health conditions and that don't do things like that. But at the same time, there's a lot more that there's a reason that people don't do things like that. Like what he did, or even just acting inappropriately in public. There's a reason that majority of people don't do that. It's because they have people that they can talk to, that they can release everything inside of them. It's just unfortunate that not everybody has that. I'm very lucky because I was born with autism, OCD, and schizophrenic tendencies. So I'm lucky that I'm able to have the support, that I'm able to have somebody from, that supports me in community living, and then I can tell them everything if I have a problem. And there's thousands of people that do, but there's also still hundreds and hundreds of people that don't have that. And, you know, and yeah, when the person has anxiety, you know, and it could just hit you, just like boom, like that. He might not have realized that he was going to feel that way. It just happened. And like I said, because he had a mental illness, I don't think, and no prior history of violence, I don't think he honestly meant to do what he did. Because, so I can't judge him because I know from my experience, I have a cousin that has anxiety disorders from a situation that she had no control over. And in this case, I read up on this guy. He lost his brother. His brother was killed. So he developed obviously he developed mental health issues because he felt responsible for what happened to his brother, obviously. So it made him, and I'm pretty sure he did want help, and that's why the police were involved. Because I bet you he tried whatever he could to, and each time they sent him to a hospital, he didn't need medication because, yes, he did, but he just needed someone to talk to, right? He just needed to hit all his emotions, all his feelings out. Because I was telling my worker that supports me out in public today that medication can decrease anxiety, but you also need to talk about it. People need to tell other people what exactly is going on. Because otherwise anxiety medication won't work. Because eventually all that will bottle up. And because anxiety medication is meant to decrease it, you don't know it's coming on. You don't know it's coming on as quickly. So, and I honestly feel bad for this guy that did this, because obviously he felt responsible for what happened to his brother. And just like my cousin Shana, she felt like she was the one, she is a bad person because her mother didn't pay attention to her when she was younger. And she wasn't, she didn't have that connection with her mom. And I guess she felt in a different way that everything was her fault. And I guess that prevented her from making friends and speaking out to people because, and we don't know what's going on in their mind unless you have a mental illness yourself, like I do. And a person that's born with similar struggles, then only they know what that feels like. Only they know what it's like to be all right one minute and then all of a sudden wake up one day and then you have real bad anxiety and then you just, all hell breaks loose, pretty much. You just feel like you want to plow through, a bunch of people or something like that. And it's not something that is planned. It, like, sometimes I get really bad anxiety and it gets so bad over time that if I don't take something for it, um, you know, this, not very often I get that, but yeah, I still have anxiety problems. And in the moment, I do feel like I want to punch somebody out just for the sake of it, you know? hmm You know? And it's not because I had any traumatic disorder. I was born that way. I was born with them struggles, right? And but my cousin Shana, like I said, she wasn't born that way. She developed that over time, just from her mother not paying attention to her. So she just stayed in her room with the dogs a lot. She just stayed in her room, never came out. So and she was like that even when I was up there, when I used to go up there, and she was like 33, 30 something years old, you know? But she wouldn't have been like that. And I can even tell on her face that she was nervous a lot. And, you can just tell. You can see it on her face, that she wasn't comfortable with a lot of things. Um, um, but, like when me and her used to go shopping, she did have a few jobs, but, she just didn't make friends that easily because, you know, when somebody has that bad of a mental health, it's harder for them to make friends unless they get help or they connect with somebody that has to connect with the community that has the same issues as them, right? That way they can understand on the same level, on a similar level, you know? And I'm telling you right now, if my cousin heard about this man, the 30-year-old man that did this, and she knew, and she heard that he has mental health, she'd be like, I know exactly how that feels. She knows, she would say, I know. She would think to herself, I definitely know. Because, and nobody understands, and it feels like I'm alone, but she's like, I know what it's like to be okay one minute, 1 hour or 2 hours later, and then the next hour or two after that, it's like you just freak right out, and you just have to get out of there because it's like, and there was a couple times where, like I said, she had to leave work, you know, and for me, it's very personal because, like I said, I myself was born with a lot of problems, which caused me a lot of anxiety. And I don't know what it's like to have traumatic experiences, but I don't need to know because I have issues going on. I have intellectual disabilities. I know what it's like to develop, to be okay 1 hour later, and then all of a sudden, there's some cases in the morning where I wake up and I'm perfectly okay. I'm smiling, I'm talking, and then in about a half an hour later, I just feel like shit. I feel agitated. I feel not very happy inside. And I'm telling you right now, I don't wake up like that. But after a while, it just happens. It just hits me like boom. And you have no control over it. You don't know when it's gonna happen. It just happens. It just does. And so that could happen a lot with my cousin Shana. And it's not just her either. It apparently happened with this guy who drove through to that festival. And it was obvious that he was fine. But then he might have just he might have just snapped. And he might not have even realized that it was coming on, you know? He might not have realized himself. He didn't plan to do that. It just happened. And a lot of people who saw the news and not know what it's like would be like, you know what? I don't excuse this guy's behavior, but I understand what that's like. Because I was in issues when I was like in school, or when I was 30 years old, and then but then it's like, boy, I'm lucky that I got the help that I needed, because now I know how to handle my anxiety. Now I just talk about it all the time, but I'm sorry that other people don't have that like I do. And I know from personal level, I feel the same way. I feel like if he had the opportunity to let out how he feels, and, he wouldn't have done what he did. I'm telling you right now, he wouldn't have done that. Because I would have given some time to heal, and, it's only when you tell people exactly what's going on, and maybe explain to people that, hey, I feel it's my fault, or am I a bad person, and, and then they're able to tell you, well, no, of course not. Of course not. You're not a bad person. And the it's getting dark now, so hang on. I have to open the blinds here a little bit. So, and then I just wanted to remind everybody who is suffering from mental health, whether you're young or old, that whatever you're going through, it's not your fault. If you walk into a situation, and if you walk into your parents having an argument, or, or for whatever reason, or, you had a traumatic experience of some kind, and you feel like it's your fault, it's definitely not. It just, you can't control that. You can't control what other people are doing to you, and if I had a chance to tell him that it wasn't his fault that his brother was killed, it was on them. And same with my cousin Shana and all of you guys. If I knew at the time that Shayna's mom wasn't paying attention to her or having that, I would have told her long from now that, you know, it wasn't her fault. It wasn't her fault at all. You know, that she had nothing to do with this. That was your mom being an idiot and being not a, that was your mom, who shouldn't have been a mom in the first place, you know? And, you know,